What's up, everybody? My name is Josh, and welcome to a new episode of Subjectively Correct, a movie podcast with myself and my good friend Matt.
Hello.
This week, or this month, I always say week because, I don't know, I think in weeks, but this month we are looking at aquatic films. That's films with a watery setting. And no, neither of us have picked Free Willy. We're going for something a bit newer and a bit freakier on both accounts, I think. Let's just jump right into it. I think it's an interesting subject because when I was trying to think of watery films, I actually came up short. I managed to end up with like two to choose from that I knew of.
Really?
But
well, actually, is this with the obligatory rule that the other person can't have seen the movie already?
Yes, totally.
Otherwise, you would have more. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought of Waterworld immediately, but as as we heard in the last episode, Matt's already a big time Waterworld fan. So.
Hell yeah!
So there's no point gushing over that. But trying to do something that's new to at least one of us, if not both of us.
Yes. Yeah.
So your pick, which is the older film. If anyone's wondering, we tend to go with the older film first and the newer film second. So, Matt, introduce the older film for us, which is your pick for this month's discussion.
Yeah, I brought The Deep House from 2021, so it's actually not that old. This is directed by Alexandre Bustillo and Julian Maury, starring in speaking roles 3 people: James Jagger, Camille Rowe, and Eric Savin. Written by the 2 directors, Alexandre Bustillo, Julian Maury, with, from what I gathered, support by Julian David and Rachel Parker, 2 more people. And The Deep House is, I feel, a very unique movie, and I feel like it fell through the cracks a bit too much, because I think I want more eyes on this movie, so I'm very glad that I could pick this for this episode, actually. The Deep House, The Deep House tells the story of like a annoying vlogging travel couple who just seek interesting spots to film and put on their stinky YouTube channel. Especially the dude is very obnoxious with the viewer and subscriber hunting. His girlfriend, his partner, not so much. And these 2 people, they find a secret spot where a building, a residential building, is submerged in a lake deep underwater. And so they decide to go dive in there and explore this underwater house. The twist, the house is haunted. So we got a haunted house story underwater. That's basically the crutch of this whole thing. And this is so cool to me because after 20 minutes, they are out of water. They are on land to establish the characters and the story. But after those first initial 20 minutes, the entire movie is genuinely filmed underwater while these people dive through this house. And it's unbroken this way. The entire rest of the movie is down there. And this is also, this is also one of those reasons why I think I put the aquatic theme on our list of themes. Because, I like aquatic settings as a whole and everything that comes with that. But I think there's also this thing, I love storytelling in difficult environments. And underwater is basically, humans are not supposed to be there. They're literally not able to exist down there if they are not, supported by technology. And to tell an entire story down there in that setting where we are not supposed to be is wild to me, especially when it's not done with any trickery, but actually filmed physically underwater. Yeah, sure, the house is a set, but it's still actually submerged underwater, and we are still following actual people diving down there. And I think that changes, like, it changes the writing, how the people can communicate. It changes the cinematography because the entire visual vibe is completely different than what you would get on land. And these sort of things add way more to this movie than the basic story, because the basic story, a haunted house story, is not the most unique or inventive thing. But I think this is where the general reception is really split. Because, of course, you have a lot of people that say, hey, this is a stinky gimmick movie that really doesn't do much once you look past the diving gimmick, which I get. And I do also think having these two divers be the protagonists who can't properly communicate, they have, like a walkie-talkie system to talk. You don't get much of facial expression and hand movement and such. Underwater's out pretty much as well. There is, after a while, when you just listen to this voice-over-esque communication through the walkie-talkie systems, there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, between characters and dialogue. But I think that's inevitable. And I think that's one of those, like, traps of this production that are inevitable, but I still love that this experiment was done. I still adore them for trying this thing and pulling through to the end. And it does have positive effects as well, I think. Like the cinematography. I loved how this movie looked. But yeah, I'm very curious to what you think. I think I have a feeling I know where you're gonna lie on the reception meter.
Well, I don't know. I don't disagree with what you said. Like, I do think the most fascinating thing about the film was that it is all filmed underwater, like, genuinely, and you can tell. And the whole time watching it, just going, man, this must have been a nightmare to do.
Yes.
Because even just, like, without spoiling anything, the main two characters have a breathing apparatus on, but then there are other characters that don't. So there are characters who are just holding their breath underwater to do a scene. And kudos to them, because they still managed to perform in that condition and make it look like they weren't just spending 2 seconds holding their breath and moving around. So yeah, definitely big round of applause for that, because I think just logistically and practically that's just so hard to do, and they did pull it off. It did look pretty good for most of the film, and I didn't really it didn't look like they were struggling at any point to make the film, if you know what I mean.
It still looked polished, I think. Still under control, this filmmaking. Yeah,
it looked like it was the way it was meant to be, which, I think is a pretty good achievement on a technical level. What you kind of said, though, in one part, like, after a while, the voices kind of start from the main characters, because they've got, like, these communicators and stuff. Like, it does start actually feeling quite disconnected from them.
Yeah.
And I found that a lot, like, after the initial kind of, them talking and stuff, but kind of, when they've been underwater for a while and you've been hearing them talking for a while, I started feeling like the whole thing was dubbed almost. And maybe it was
100%, I would say. Yeah.
And that's from a very kind of realistic point of view. I can understand why that would be so, because recording audio underwater's got to be way worse than shooting video underwater. So
yeah.
But it still had that weird kind of almost a bit of dissonance for me, like, because it did feel like you're watching people move and express themselves, but then you're hearing something that's been recorded at a different time.
Yeah.
And it's not bad, like, it's not like janky. It actually does match up, and it is done as well as it could be. But it's that thing of, like, it's like one of those little things that as a human you can just pick up, because you're so used to seeing people talk and hearing them talk compared with their body movements. Yeah. So if it's the slightest bit out, you pick up on it really quickly. And yeah, that kind of I wouldn't say it necessarily even ruined it or anything. It just kind of it felt a bit weird in points, like because of that. Like,
No, I
so
agree. Yeah.
again, not that it held it back. I think anything like that, because yeah, it was enough to just kind of go, okay, fair enough. I can understand it because of the fact they're underwater. So
Yeah.
But I guess this is a good time to say that I'm not a fan of horror films. As in, I like the concept. I don't mind horror films. I often enjoy I love dark subject matter and things, and I love supernatural stuff, and I love all the things that kind of contribute to horror films. And I love even conceptually like certain tropes and things in horror films, which I actually like one of the ones that happened to this towards the end. But I don't like getting scared. So I went into this one with a bit of trepidation because I was like, okay, I watched the trailer, which I don't normally do, but knowing that this was a bit of a potentially scary film, I kind of watched the trailer and went, okay, what am I in for? And the whole underwater thing as well kind of adds to that for me because, I'm one of those people who large bodies of water kind of freak the shit out of me.
Same.
So this isn't as bad because it's all contained within a house underwater. So for some reason that doesn't feel as bad, even though it's kind of like a trapped scenario. Like I'd probably be freaking out more if it was just a big open expanse of open water. I don't know why. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
But whatever. But what I did like about the film was, I think, in a weird way, the thing I like about it is also something I didn't like about it. Like, it's very consistent from start to finish. It feels like a very kind of solid one note from the start all the way through to the end without huge amounts of dynamics. And maybe that's something that people have criticized it for with the plot. Like you say, like the story hasn't really blown anyone away. And maybe it's a little bit predictable in that sense. But I didn't feel like there were huge moments of like, oh my God, or super tense parts, or, it was just kind of very much a very even kind of vibe all the way through.
Yeah.
And there are climaxes and there's ups and downs and stuff, but it didn't really shake me out of my chair kind of thing like I was expecting.
That makes me wonder if they maybe chose the already established haunted house trope specifically because you already know what's going on. And it might be harder to actually tell a original story in this difficult environment. I could see that being a thing.
True. But then again, I do think like that kind of left me feeling like, okay, so the underwater thing is the gimmick and that's the whole point. And there's not really much else going on kind of thing.
But it's such a cool gimmick, dude.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's the kind of movie. It's the kind of movie for me where I feel like the making of could be its own amazing feature length thing.
Yeah, that might be heaps more interesting, to be honest.
I could see that. Yeah.
But because I agree with you, like the characters, yeah. The guy and the girl, like the guy's annoying as all hell. He's some try hard YouTuber wanker talking about views all the time and like, oh, the followers are gonna love this shot and blah blah blah. And the girl is way more realistic or relatable, I suppose, because she's not as ridiculous. She actually has genuine fears about things and isn't just all about the social media. So she seems like she's having a fun adventure, but she's not like being a douche about it, whereas the dude is obviously, much more driven by numbers and all that kind of thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I've always find it surprising when people don't like a story because they don't like a character, because I'm actually quite a fan of dislikable characters.
Yes, yeah.
And I really like stories with characters who I hate because they can be written really well and they can be really interesting, and that's kind of a bit more of a challenging dynamic than someone who I immediately fall in love with.
Yeah.
But so this dude, I didn't mind him so much in that sense, and I actually quite like. There's a trope towards the end, which I guess we've kind of established by now that we kind of do talk about spoilers a little bit.
Yes.
But just as speaking to you as well, the bit at the end where he kind of gets sucked into the house, the environment, and becomes kind of bewitched, I suppose, by the evils that are there, and is kind of trying to convince her to die with him and stay, kind of thing, underwater. I really like that kind of trope. Like, to me, that's really cool and interesting. I love the
possession thing.
Well, not so much possession, but like your ally is now your enemy, kind of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see.
And it's beyond their control, perhaps, and you can't trust them anymore, even though you trusted them wholly beforehand. And that kind of stuff, I think, is really interesting. And I actually quite enjoyed that part of the film, probably the most out of all of it.
Interesting.
Because I think it was just a fun part of the story. Because the rest of it, like the quote unquote ghosts, I guess, and other scary bits was just kind of, again, it was very much in that kind of one note tone of, I know what's going on here, even though I'm not a huge horror buff or anything, but I feel like it was just, Haunted House 101. But hey, we're underwater.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
And that's what I mean. I guess that's not enough to carry it for me, to make me get really excited.
Yeah, go on. Sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, so I honestly went in thinking I would dislike this more than I did, because I didn't think I'd like it at all, to be honest. But I didn't mind it, as in it was okay. It's my score is not going to be very high, but it's it was competently made. I was very impressed by it technically, but everything else about it was just a bit kind of like humdrum. Like, yeah, all right.
I get it. I mean, yeah, I'm sure this isn't the movie you would fall in love with if you're going into movies for the story. Not at all. I think you're gonna get something out of the movie if you're down for like the artistic vibe of a production and the technical marvel of it. I think you have to look behind the scenes to really appreciate this film, because as a plain film itself, it's probably not very engaging.
Well, there was one other thing that kind of took me out of it as well, which was essentially the camera work. Because, and again, this is kind of a technical thing, which I assume would be a bit of a logistical nightmare. Yeah. So I don't necessarily blame them for how they did the camera work, but it didn't really work for me, is the thing.
Really? Why?
So the beginning of the film is very found footagey.
Yeah.
Like it's the characters with handheld cameras, and they're, so you're getting the shaky cam, you're getting the walking around with the GoPro kind of footage. And then as they kind of progress, we get more of a production kind of footage where we've got wider shots and we've got longer kind of edits and stuff. And then when we get underwater, it goes back to this almost like found footage again, and they've got this drone with them, which is like a camera that follows them around. I thought that was a cool idea for
agreed.
Hey, this is why there's a third person kind of view. But the camera angle is not always from the drone. Like there are other cameras around that are making shots that you see, kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe.
So it's kind of like they went to all this effort to kind of legitimize the fact that there are camera shots of both characters and wider shots and all that kind of thing, but then added other shots as well, especially the close-ups as well. Like there's a lot of shots that kind of are very close up and very claustrophobic to kind of make you feel like you're trapped underwater and in this kind of environment and in this hostile kind of place.
Yeah.
But if anything, they kind of took me out the most, because there's a lot of shots where it's just like almost only the two faces of our protagonists, and that has nothing to do with this drone that's following them around. It's very obvious someone's sticking a camera in their face to kind of get that angle. And as much as it would be effective in any other kind of, I guess, film, because they kind of set up this premise of it being like justified camera footage, as in realistic camera footage that they would have got, whenever it wasn't, that kind of took me out a little bit, because it just felt like it didn't fit as much, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit funny. For me, it was teetering right along the line that I could suspend my disbelief enough for it to work. I was realizing that it's not actually all the drone and their GoPros and whatnot, but it was fine enough for not to not throw me out of it. Also, a lot of there were a lot of glamour shots and stuff that I could totally see for a travel vlogger to get as B-roll stuff. So it kind of fitted my imagination, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I think I just would have preferred them to lean harder one way or the other, like go full Blair Witch Project found footage,
Yeah.
or go total we're making a movie, so we've got wide shots and production and lighting and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, which they
Sure.
obviously do have, but make it look like that as well. And there was one shot in particular, I think, where they go into a room and there's lots of debris in the water and everything, so they can't see very far in front of them.
Yeah.
And it starts off really convincing because you get like their POV kind of stuff where they're shining a torch and it only goes like 2 centimeters in front of them and they can't see beyond that. But then it switches to the drone and the drone can see everything and there's no debris or anything. And the drone is meant to be like just above them. And it's like, okay, that seems weird. What happened there? Like,
I don't know. I figured it was just the debris was slowly, settling at that point or whatever.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, we're getting nitpicky now anyway, but
yes,
I just there were things like
person.
there were just a few things like that kind of didn't like settle for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So they and maybe horror film and stuff is meant to be unsettling, so maybe that's part of it. But I don't think I don't think they meant it in this particular way. Mm-hmm. So, but final thought on that though is I really like the editing.
Yeah.
That stood out for me as very, very strong. And I actually looked up the editor because they've got a one-word name, which is just Baxter.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I noticed in the credits it was just like edited by Baxter.
I didn't catch that.
Okay, I got to look this dude up, and so I did, and he's done lots. I assume he. Apologies if it is she. Who knows? It's a one-word name. But they've done lots of horror films and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're obviously very good at that sort of timing and stuff. Because I think for horror films as well, when you're trying to build tension or thrillers or anything like that, you need to have good editing. You've got to time things right and hit beats on the right moment and, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like this film had good editing in that sense, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I also didn't like the soundtrack, so I'll just throw that out there.
Here's the thing with the soundtrack. I hated it too, but it fit the, stinky, pretentious vlogger type.
True.
Like it's the dumb music that I would expect from these kind of people. And in that context, I was okay with it, or I liked it even.
Yeah, and it wasn't a major hate for me. I was just like, when the credits rolled and that cheesy song started playing, I was like,
yeah.
I'm like, God damn it.
The first 5 minutes or so, they have this bad, corny, pop rock shit. And I was like, that's what they would play on YouTube. I could see that. Probably copyright-free
that's a good
stuff.
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Oh, and another thing as well, I don't need everything to be happiness and rainbows all the time, but I'm not sure I quite enjoyed the ending.
Oh, yeah?
I was kind of... And I think it's more because the horror films that I enjoy follow particular tropes and things, and there's always the survivor trope. And they subverted that in this one.
Yeah, isn't that great? Isn't it original?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's not really a criticism against the film. It just, personally, I would have preferred to see the other option or the other outcome. Just because it would have felt neater, I think, for me.
No, I don't think I like the idea that once they go underwater, they never come back out. I like that idea.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, actually, yeah, when you put it that way.
Though I do believe that there could have been more exciting ways to end it than her barely not getting to surface.
Well, and I think that's where I like the bit where the dude kind of obviously got possessed or whatever, or was, sucked into the whole vibe of whatever evil there is in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then is like, he's turned and he's like, okay, we've both got to die now and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That got really interesting to me because then there's like the whole snake thing where like there's a snake that's trying to get inside her and he's telling her like just let it in kind of thing because it's going to take you over, and she's about to like stab her guts out because she feels like there's something inside her, and that stuff to me got really interesting for about 10 minutes, and then they kind of got over it.
And then it's over.
Well, they kind of moved on quickly after that, but
it's kind of funny. I feel when I see this sort of stuff, the trope that you like, I often think like most audiences are probably like, stop it with that. I want to see the cool ghosts. I don't want to see a normal guy being evil all of a sudden. So it's actually interesting to me to hear you being down for that.
Well, I think 'cause it reminds me a lot of my favorite kind of, I guess, thriller / horror films where, you know, I really like films like Event Horizon, where Sam Neill's character, you know, gets possessed.
Sure.
And turns on everybody. I love things in like Aliens where the company guy kind of goes against what's logical and smart. I love the movie Sunshine, where again they kind of put their colleagues in harm's way because they think they've got this like godlike insight into something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just kind of like that whole idea of even like your closest ally can turn on you and betray you because they're convinced of something that seems irrational, but the question is it or is it not kind of thing? Because, you know, like in this film, obviously there are things that are, you know, unreal and scary going on. So is he so wrong to kind of go succumb to that? Because it's not like it's not true.
Yeah, I mean, like he said somewhere in the movie, everything is weird underwater. I guess he was right, which is also such a good line.
Pretty much.
Honestly, do you know of? I don't know if there's any other movie that spends so much time underwater directly. Like even most well-known underwater movies, they are still with lots of scenes in like underwater facilities where they talk and walk and whatever normally.
Yeah, like
but like full on submerged, like.
Yeah, like I think of something like The Abyss, where yes, they're underwater, but they're in a an underwater facility.
Yeah, in a creation, in a artificial thing.
Most of the time they're actually dry, you know.
That's the one, yeah. So this movie actually dares to get wet for once.
Dares to get wet. That's the line for the poster for sure.
Hell yeah.
The deep house dares to get wet.
Dude, I don't even care if this movie sucked for most people. I'm just so happy that people try shit like this. It's so crazy to pull this through.
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of where, again, for me, that was the coolest thing about it was just like, yeah, this is very unique and challenging, and I'd actually be interested in seeing a making of because I'd like, how the hell do you do that even? Like, because a lot of scenes as well, like there's that thing where they could have shot it not underwater because they're just rooms with maybe they could put a filter over it, but you can tell that they did because of the movement and the way the physics work and everything.
But also the way the light breaks and shit, like the whole, the physics, the whole physics underwater changes the visual style so much in such a great way.
And I think that comes back to like how I often prefer practical effects over like CG, even if they're a bit janky by comparison, because they just, you know, they seem more real because they literally are real.
Yeah, exactly.
So, even if it's like not perfect, it's still more realistic and more visceral because of that. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I think it's a interesting film, and it's definitely a bit of a fascination because of how different it is and how it was made and everything. But I got to be honest, it's not top. It's not like, you know, I'll probably never watch it again.
Give me your rating, and would you recommend it?
Okay, my rating's not going to sound very good because I'm going to base it on my enjoyment.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing it out of 10, I would give it a 4. I told you. Because I think of it as like a 2 out of 5. Like,
but would you still say it's worth a watch?
To the right person, I would.
Okay.
Because, you know, it is interesting. it's cool to see that it has been all shot, well, mostly shot underwater, but the underwater parts are very much underwater. And for, I know that sounds silly, but for a good over half of the movie, everything is underwater, like you say.
Yeah.
And that's cool. But all the rest of it, I'm just like, nah. Take it or leave it kind of thing,
Well, I will double your 4 out of 10. I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Wow.
My rating even went up on this rewatch. I just love this project. It's so cool and interesting. And that, like, even past the first layer of the story itself. That's what I mean. Past that first layer, it's an awesome production for me.
Hey,
I'm having a lot of fun with these fishies swimming around. But we're gonna emerge from the depths now. We're gonna spend more time on the surface of the water with your pick, Nowhere from 2023.
Yes, this is a Spanish film that came out last year. First of all, it's directed by Albert Pinto, and it's starring Ana Castillo, and basically only Ana Castillo.
Yeah.
But there's also a guy called Tamar Novas, who is probably the next biggest character. And then there are other characters in it, but I don't even think they're worth mentioning because they're basically cameos to fill out the start of the film and not really much else.
Yeah.
It's got a couple of writers, Miguel Ruiz and I want to say Sean Winslow. Maybe it's Sean Winslow. Butchering names again, as I can do.
Who knows?
Yeah, foreign names. I got to stop picking foreign films that I can't pronounce.
For real.
But so, basic premise of Nowhere is, there's the two leads, a guy and a girl. They're a couple. She's pregnant. They're trying to escape a bad regime. They're doing the whole like we're refugees kind of thing, and they've paid some people smugglers to kind of get them out of the country. And the way that the people smugglers are doing that by shoving people into shipping containers and then shipping them out, supposedly like on trucks and then on ships out of the country. Along the way, though, this is all the very first 10 minutes kind of setup of the film. They get separated. So our lead female, I forget her character's name, which I really shouldn't.
How dare you? Mia.
I know, that's just Mia. Yes, she's like the whole film. I shouldn't forget that. So Mia gets separated from her partner, who ends up in another shipping container because there's like they get stopped at checkpoints and people come in and check and find people. Mia's own shipping container full of people actually gets discovered and pretty much everyone gets killed, but she's hiding, so she's the only one left in there. So she ends up in a shipping container all on her own, heavily pregnant, and put on a ship, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the ship gets caught in a big storm, and her shipping container and other shipping containers get thrown overboard. I can't remember if the ship actually sinks or not. I don't think it matters.
I don't think it does.
But the cargo kind of falls overboard, and it essentially becomes almost like a bit of a Castaway kind of survival story, as our lead character Mia is having to figure out how to survive in this shipping container as it kind of half floats, half sinks in the middle of the ocean. We have no idea where. And so most of this story takes place not only inside a shipping container that is like knee deep in water because it has holes in the side from where like they're bullet holes from where the checkpoints where they got shot at and stuff. It's letting water in. So she's trying to, stop that. But it's also, whenever you see outside, it's just a wide open expanse of ocean. And there's nothing around for, as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
And as the story goes on, it's basically survival 101, really. Like, I reckon, because the story kind of, she finds other people's luggage and stuff in the container. There are a couple of boxes full of like, one of them's full of just headphones and one of them's full of
Tupperware,
that's right.
Yeah.
And just random shit, essentially. And she has to essentially kind of try and survive as long as she can. until, the resolution of the film where, she eventually does get out of it. But in the meantime, she gives birth to her baby and has to look after her baby as well, which adds another kind of wrinkle to the whole survival thing. Yeah. And it might sound quite preposterous because it is, really. Like, my take on this film, I like it because it's one of those, it's one of those stories that I take as a bit of an allegory for something else. Like, it almost has a bit of a biblical kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Because it is a preposterous story. Like, there are so many things that happen and ways that she survives and things that you kind of go, yeah, as if, or like, that got really lucky right there, or, surely you would have died from that by now, or, whatever. But, and there's lots of chance kind of success and things that happen along the way. But if you try to take it realistic, as in this is a real hardcore survival film, I feel like you'll be disappointed. But if you kind of do suspend disbelief a bit and go, this is kind of preposterous, but it's almost like a fantasy tale and an epic kind of, it reminds me of an epic poem of Odyssey or, Homer's Odyssey or the Epic of Gilgamesh or something, some of those classic Greek tales that teach you about morals and humanity and all that kind of thing. It's not at the same level as those, don't get me wrong, but that's the level that I enjoyed this on. And the reason why I kind of thought this would be a fun one to see what you think as well. Because I also thought on a technical level, there are some fucking cool shots in this film.
Yeah.
And really takes my breath away, some of them. Or are quite harrowing as well. Like early on when she's in her shipping container and there's other containers around that have been thrown off from the ship as well.
Yeah.
And she can hear the other people in another container
that was fucked up.
As it kind of sinks and stuff. And that, oh my God, the way they portrayed that, because it was only from her perspective, but you could hear everything and just the helplessness of it as well. I just was like, oh man, that was so well done.
That was fucked up.
That's what, yeah.
Because you don't even see the people in the container. You literally see just the container and hear screams. That's it. But it had such a crazy strong effect. I was amazed by that as well. Yeah.
And I feel like this film, I don't think this is the best film ever, but I feel like it's full of those kind of moments. Like, there are certain scenes and moments where I'm just like, whoa, I can't believe we just did that.
some ballsy decisions.
Things. Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get to that. I'll hear what you want to say first, but there's just a scene where she kind of manages to get out of the container and kind of climb on top of it, but because it's all metal and everything, she cuts her leg open.
Yeah,
and they show it in such a visceral and real and impactful way that I physically cringed and felt every single bit of it when I was watching. That I was just like, what the fuck? And something as simple as that, just cutting your leg on a bit of metal. But anyway, before I go on, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Matt. What did you think watching this one?
Yeah, here's the thing. Going into this, I was expecting a more grounded story with the refugee theme being. I was expecting it to take more inspiration from real world refugee stories. But what's the story here? There was the regime that she's escaping was killing old people and kids and pregnant women because the resources were getting scarce. So it sounded to me like a almost apocalyptic dystopian overpopulation thing or whatever. It felt so far removed from reality, like bits of that exist already, obviously, but it felt like a science fiction thing to me in how strong it was portrayed. So that was already surprising to me, and that's already put the setting in a less realistic point of view for me. But it was like the presentation of that place, of that, before we go to see the presentation of that regime crumbling and everybody trying to escape or survive, was, even though the budget wasn't that high, that was pretty impressively designed. The costumes as well, from all the guards that you see and stuff. That was still nicely designed, even though that from a story point that was a bit far out. But yeah, once we get out of the on the water, on the ocean, some very ballsy decisions, honestly, like the baby. Like they have a real toddler that they have her carry around in that weird environment throughout almost all of the movie. That's already something that I wouldn't really expect from any movie these days. Like either you would just write out the kid entirely from a story, or you would minimize it so much that you could use like a puppet or whatever. But they had a real goddamn toddler that they involved in a lot of active scenes, which I was surprised by, and it worked pretty well, I guess. It was pretty nightmarish, for sure.
Well, because I was thinking about what if they did just get rid of the baby? Like, what was the need to have her pregnant and give birth? And other than it playing into a bit of, that kind of biblical kind of tale.
Yes, his name was Noah.
Yeah, but that whole story of like motherhood and all that kind of thing in those sort of scenarios, I think it did add to the whole survival desperation of everything, because now she's looking after a baby as well as trying to feed herself and survive on her own.
Yeah, I mean that was her reason to stay alive and not just give up. So definitely there was a point for it. Sure, yeah. Still, like that's so difficult to write that. So yeah, props for them for sticking with that. I don't even know how this was filmed in Spain, right? So I don't even know how are the laws there for like child or toddler actors, whatever, the safety laws and so whatever. I feel like there must have been a lot going on the set to ensure the safety of that kid in that.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
In that half submerged container and whatever it is, yeah.
Like a lot of movies like this, it probably looked a lot more dangerous than it actually was.
Yes, for sure. So, yeah,
because this film looks constantly dangerous, because the whole thing, even inside the container, like they're living in like knee-high water at the least, if not higher, constantly, and trying to get on top of boxes and stuff to stay dry and things, and then there's like jagged bits of metal, and it's constantly a hostile environment.
Yeah,
but I don't think in reality that baby was ever in trouble.
I guess it was still screaming a lot, so it was definitely unhappy.
Yeah,
but a surprising amount of like bits of gore and like gross out stuff. She vomits, she eats a placenta, she bleeds.
You see her give birth.
That
pretty strong
birth
move.
shot was dope and surprising. Yeah, honestly,
like not in a weird way, but it was. They didn't shy away from anything, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
like even down to when she eventually gets out of the container and starts like fishing for fish. The way she does that is by using her baby's feces to draw
the
them
diaper.
In. Yeah, and
it was good.
They didn't, they didn't try and like polish it up or anything. They're like, no, this is what's actually happening. And I really like that kind of visceral side of the whole filmmaking, like whether it's the container full of people sinking or cutting a leg open or giving birth or any of that kind of stuff. Like they just kind of showed you even though it's fantastical, they showed you the kind of raw reality of those moments just in your face kind of thing. And I thought that was very cool.
I'm thinking, I'm still trying to figure out where I am on this movie as a total though. I do feel like this could have been used. The story could have been packaged better for a more meaningful attempt or whatever. I feel like there was this very obvious allegory for real life events that wasn't really used or whatever. I feel like it lost something there, and so like the way it is, it feels a bit too dramatic. I don't know, like too melodramatic.
Yeah,
there's something about this. I don't know. Like production-wise, some very strong moments and decisions, but I don't know if I like the story entirely.
Well, just thinking of production wise as well, one of the shots that stayed with me as well was when her container eventually sinks.
Yeah.
And you get this wide shot from underwater of it just slowly kind of going deeper and deeper. And I think because after all that time of all the effort trying to keep it afloat and all that kind of thing, and it eventually does sink, just having that wide shot just going, here it is, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Again, is kind of like when something important happens, you see it for all its fullness kind of thing. Like, and I really like that about just the direction, I suppose, on the film.
Mm-hmm. I was actually surprised that we did see the ocean. Like, I was kind of going into this really being generally set all in this enclosed environment, in this container, which would have made the filming much more easier as well. So I was actually surprised when there was quite a lot of time spent on the open ocean later on, as well as she climbs up on the container through the hole. Yeah, there was clearly a lot of effort put into this from production value.
And I think you're right as well. Like, there's a lot of it's just very surprising.
Yeah,
where perhaps we're used to seeing different films in these settings and the limitations of those films, but in this one, it's like, no, normally we wouldn't do that, or normally that would be a limitation, but this time we're actually going to film it, or we're going to do that. We're going to show you the whole ocean. We're not just going to stick it inside of one room.
Yeah,
you know,
this movie doesn't take the easy way out.
Yeah,
but further from that, I don't think it reaches more than that. I think, right? Do you know what I mean?
I think so, because I do agree that the story is not super, super strong.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm being generous by giving it this kind of, subtext that maybe isn't there. As much as I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed kind of reading into it and, giving it this kind of depth that may or may not have been intentional.
I mean, tell me more about the Bible stuff if you want, because, dude, it took me way too long to realize the name for the kid was a reference to Noah's Ark, and then I was like, oh yeah, of course, but why?
Well, it's not that I think of it as like a literal reference to the Bible. It's more like there are those stories throughout time, like mythical stories that are told, especially back in the day. And that's why I think of like Greek mythology as well. And probably every kind of mythology under the sun has this equivalent. And I feel like this is kind of a modern day myth or an epic kind of tale that someone would tell. And maybe it's based on something real, but it's exaggerated. Like maybe there's a story of a refugee who got lost at sea in a shipping container, but was, found 2 days later and everyone was happy. But someone has kind of extrapolated on that and exaggerated and turned it into this kind of
fantastic
dissection of like what it means to be human or a mother or surviving or, lost and alone and being cut off as well. Because there's definitely a lot of theme, I think, or a lot of theme. There's definitely a strong theme in this film as well about being cut off from the world. Because for a while she's still got like a phone that works. Yeah. And every now and then she manages to make contact with either her voicemail or with her partner at some points. Even though she's lost in the middle of the ocean, she occasionally manages to make contact with the outside world, as useless and kind of hopeless as that is. But then eventually, that ends as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by it taking on this kind of like biblical property, like not necessarily Bible related necessarily, but that kind of mythical exaggeration of a very real thing, but taken to the extreme to kind of highlight aspects of humanity and fortitude and, everything that you could kind of draw from it. But maybe that's just me and I'm looking for it too much. So
in the context of it being like a fantastical Odyssey version of the real world refugee scenario, I do think that works better than what I had expected. What I was going into expecting. I see
Yeah.
where you're coming from. Yeah, I
And
think
that's
that
what I
makes
mean.
more
Like,
sense.
I can understand I'm probably being quite generous with that interpretation because I know that works for me. So I ended up liking the film a lot more when I thought of it in that context.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to do that because it means I enjoy it more.
Yeah.
But I also, I also accept that perhaps that's not what they're intending. So, you know,
Who knows? I
but yeah.
wouldn't deny it right off the bats.
But I do also think, and I'd like to hear your opinion as well. I thought the uh, Anna Castillo, who played Mia, the lead character,
Yeah.
what a great job she did, because
I mean, she had to carry that thing. Literally, the
it's
baby.
basically a monologue the whole film. So, like,
Yeah.
she didn't have a lot of talking either. Like, I like that they didn't, and that's one thing that I kind of liked about Nowhere, I suppose, more than the Deep House. Like, I felt like some of the lines in the Deep House were there just for the sake of kind of telling you something that's going on. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
for
I'm
sure.
doing this now.
For
Whereas I
exposition,
felt,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, it was just straight exposition for no like context.
Hmm.
Whereas I felt like at least in Nowhere they didn't bother throwing in like lines for her to say to kind of explain stuff that she wouldn't say out loud anyway, especially being on her own and
Yeah. Yeah.
and having the baby there then gave her more opportunity to talk because she talked to the baby and maybe express herself more vocally that way.
True. Clever. That
But
goddamn baby.
yeah.
God.
Goddamn baby.
Goddamn baby. Didn't even get a credit, I don't think. It didn't even get a credit in the credit
I don't
roll.
remember seeing it, yeah. But
Sad.
yeah, for me I think Nowhere was just like a good series of moments of powerful kind of moments almost and interesting moments where like there were some shots that they just didn't shy away from and some kind of decisions that they made that were like you say, like they didn't take the easy way out.
But they take like the easy way out. It's in some capacity sometimes. Like after she gets her leg cut, she magically finds she breaks open the flat screen TV for some wires to sew her
Yeah.
wound shut. And that was like out of nowhere kind of magic.
That's what I mean about it being kind of preposterous. Yeah, like suddenly she gets really industrious and starts taking apart these seemingly useless things around her to, mine it for parts or that it can be useful kind of thing. And yeah, it's a bit like far-fetched in that sense, but
I feel like it would have worked a lot better if they had introduced the resources she has in there more thoroughly. I didn't even know there was a TV in there until she took it apart in the last third or whatever. I just saw all the Tupperware. Lots of Tupperware.
Well, with that in mind, what kind of score / rating would you land on for this one?
Cold numbers, I probably would give it a 6 out of 10. There are individual moments that I would probably remember because they were impressive, but I think overall, don't think this would stick with me too much.
Yep.
What would you give it?
I'm going to mirror your one for Deep House and probably give it an 8.
All right.
Because it did stick with me and I have kind of really gone down that rabbit hole of, this being a kind of mythical epic.
Right.
So, I say that with a caveat. I'm not so stupid that I think that everyone should have got that interpretation. But for me, it really worked. So I'm happy to roll with it.
Here is a question though. The ending. Obviously, we have already talked about spoilers, so whatever. She does survive in the end. The kid does survive in the end. You were talking about the end of the Deep House, where you would have probably rather seen her survive. Here, does the same count here, or would you maybe prefer a dramatic ending of her death? No.
I would have been okay if she'd died. I didn't want the baby to die. As preposterous as it was that he was on his little raft in the middle of the sea and gets found by fishermen. But the only reason I say that about Deep House is because there's that survivor trope of,
Okay. Yeah.
you know, classic horror films. There's always one survivor, and
The fish survived.
part part of the film is like guessing who's going to survive. In my book, like, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
So you know, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all those sorts of films, like there's a survivor, and yeah, that's just kind of like a fun little tropey thing. Not necessarily something I'd hold against the film, but I did when she didn't survive. I was just like, damn. I thought she was going to be the survivor girl.
Yeah. Well.
Whereas because this isn't like a horror kind of classic horror kind of film.
Yeah.
Speaking of nowhere.
Yeah.
If she hadn't survived, I think I would have liked some sort of resolution one way or the other. Because if it was just a story of someone getting lost at sea and then dying, I feel like that's not as interesting or doesn't necessarily have as much to say as either someone who just survives or almost survives, and you can see that there's a way out. But if there's no way out, it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, that's to be expected. Welcome to reality.
Right, but the baby survived. Isn't that enough? Wouldn't there be a more dramatic effect? Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's something, whether even if there's like the fisherman who found her body or something, and
yeah,
you know, there was some kind of resolution in that sense, I think I would have been happy. Like, but I wasn't annoyed that they did survive either, because again, to me, that kind of plays into the whole mythical quality of it. Like,
yeah,
you know, she practically dies anyway, but manages to be saved at the last minute, and you know, all is well, kind of thing.
I wasn't annoyed that she did survive. That's good.
Yeah. You can quote me on that.
Yeah.
I was not annoyed that she survived.
Now that we talked about both of these movies, here's the final important question. Would you rather have your entire house submerged underwater or be stuck in a room with a baby? The thinking
I hate
face.
This is becoming a thing. Like,
oh, you love it.
Ever since it's, do you want to be Ukrainian or deaf? But I'd have to say I'd rather be stuck in a room with a baby.
Really?
Because I don't like being underwater and feeling like I'm going to drown.
It's a hot take, I would say.
How about you?
God, I think I prefer the fish in my house, so I'd go underwater. The fish don't scream. That's good.
It would be very quiet underwater, that's for sure.
It would be very quiet. I like quiet.
True, but I feel like I've just got to put in a little effort and then the baby not screaming anymore. You know?
Well, that's subjective if it's little effort or not. I would say it's a lot of effort, probably.
But, you know, maybe, yeah. No, I don't want to be living underwater. That's not for me.
Damn.
I'm not a fish.
I bet the rent is better down there.
Probably. Down here, they pay you. Anywho, good talk. I
Great
thought
talk.
both of these films were pretty interesting and unique. Regardless
for sure.
of, like, I've not seen many films that I can compare both of these to, I have to say.
Well,
for various reasons.
I'm sure there are other survival stories like Nowhere.
Oh, yeah. But I think it did it in a way that was kind of its own and had its own kind of identity in that sense. It wasn't just another survival film.
Yeah, it definitely elevated itself from the typical like Netflix fare, since this is like a Netflix production, maybe. So it didn't really fit that bill in a good way.
I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is, but yeah.
Maybe just published on Netflix, but it might have been a production from them.
Either way. Well, and kind of like Deep House to me, because of the setting and everything, like it wasn't just another typical haunted house kind of movie, you know?
Exactly.
It was a bit more interesting as a result. So, you know, I think, you know, not bad. Could have been worse.
Could have been, sure. Could have been better if you had seen Waterworld, though.
Oh, you know. You can't deny Kevin Costner's majesty.
Oh, hell yeah. His guilt.
I love that man a little too much.
Oh, yeah.
Let's spin the wheel and see what we're going to be looking at next time.
So while I prepare the wheel, I guess this is the call to action. Message us if you got some gripes. Suggest some themes for our wheel if you got any bright ideas in your head.
Yeah.
I'm gonna spin the wheel right now to see what we will be blabbering on about in next month's episode. Blah 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 blah, and it's romance movies. We're gonna talk romance / romantic comedy. So I guess we're gonna go with that specifically.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
This was a viewer suggested category as well, or listener, I should say.
True. Yeah. Viewer suggested by Marisa, aka Japan. No, wasn't this from your sister?
This is from my sister. So hello, shout out. I know you'll be listening eventually. So
we're doing
the romantic
sister.
one.
So next episode we're gonna get wet again, probably. Right.
Oh man, I've been kind of ever since thinking about this being a category, I'm like, do we go like for the ultra cheesy, just sappy, horrible romantic comedy that I kind of still enjoy, or do I actually try and find something good, or
something actually good? That's unheard of.
Well, because I'll say one thing, like romantic comedies, I'm not against them, and I watch some of them regularly just as pure entertainment. Sure. But I wouldn't necessarily call them good. And but then there are others, like some of my favorite films you could kind of classify as a romantic comedy, I suppose. And they are very good, but they're not as romantically comedy, if you know what I mean. Like they're not as cheesy and
Sure. I feel like
bullshit.
Both romance and comedy are very broad genres anyway. Yeah. So I guess we will see how close we actually hit to the core of it.
I mean, this might be where my love for Jennifer Lopez shines.
Jennifer Lopez? Okay. I didn't know about that.
I'm a big fan of her movies.
Of her movies,
so,
okay.
And, she's got some alright songs. I don't know her personally. She might be a bit of a dick, but...
Who knows?
She's a charming actress, I find. Anyway, we can talk about that more when we reconvene next episode.
Yes, for sure. All right. So, well, it was fun exploring these watery depths with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. And by all means, get in touch if you have comments or suggestions or additions.
Or complaints.
Yeah.
We will ignore them.
Yeah. I don't even know if I've looked at anywhere where there could be any complaints. So
I've looked. Everybody has been happy.
Fantastic.
All the millions of listeners.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we gotta appease our crowds of adoring fans.
For sure.
We don't want to freak them out too much. But yeah. Until next time.
Don't swim out too much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.